A very warm welcome. This is the 8th now of the live Sport for Business webinars that we've done. Thank you to those who have been with us before, and a very warm welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. Just a couple of little housekeeping on it. First of all, if you want to get the optimum viewing experience, I found is that if you click on the gallery view in a little toggle button just up what should be up towards the top of your screens, there's a chat facility which is live over there as well, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of our session with our guests. So we'll have a chat for around about sort of 30-35 minutes, and then we'll go into to throw the floor open to all of you guys as well. We've got a little poll that we'll run just before we move into the Q&A as well. I'll give you a chance to gather your thoughts. But other than that, again, as I say, a very warm welcome, and especially to our three guests. We're joined by Maeve Galvin, who looks after the sponsorship in Electric Ireland. We're joined by Gareth Maher, who is the communications manager in the FAI and doing a great job of keeping all the football fans right up to speed when there is no football. And we're joined by Stephen O'Leary, who is my guru and my go-to on social media. Stephen and his team at Olytico write the monthly Sport for Business Irish Sport on Social Media report, which is a bit of a mouthful to do as a hashtag. The hashtag for today's conversation, if you want to join in, sadly we won't be able to because we'll be busy chatting to each other, but it's hashtag Sport for Business Social Media, which again is hardly catchy, but if you do see some nuggets, and I'm sure you will from the conversation today, please feel free to share them. We will have a highlights recording of this available later on the Sport for Business website. But without further ado, a very warm welcome to our three guests. Social media has had such an important role over the last number of years within sport. It has been the principal way in which we've engaged with fans. We've brought athletes into people's homes and onto their phones in a way that would never have been dreamt possible beforehand. You can follow stories like Tom Brady's departure from the New England Patriots live in real time from his kitchen on Instagram stories. I remember being caught up with the idea as a writer. I never liked the idea of Twitter being 140 characters as was back in the day. But in 2010, I discovered the England team unveiled for the World Cup squad about 3 hours before it was made public, because people were chatting about it on Twitter. And I thought, as a media person, this is a golden resource, which 10 years on has proven to be just the case. We're going to go into a number of those different areas as to the news elements, the entertainment elements, and the engagement elements that social media has really come to the fore in this time of crisis. But first of all, I'm going to go to Stephen for a live update really on where we are in terms of Irish sport on social media now on August the 30th, 5-6 weeks into lockdown, and with an unknown horizon still before us.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think probably the most interesting thing for us in terms of looking at the data for the month to date has been that despite the fact there's been no live sport essentially amongst any of the 30 organizations that we're currently tracking as part of the research, there really has been no noticeable decrease in the amount of content that the organizations are pushing out. And in one side, I suppose, there's no surprise there, because organizations, I think, are treating social media as a way to keep in touch with fans. And without live sport taking place, it's one of the best ways for them to actually sort of continue to communicate and continue to stay in touch. But equally, they're going to have to be, and they started to be, I guess, kind of clever and creative with the content that they're sharing. So we've seen a huge amount of archive footage being rolled out. But not just simply showing the archive footage, also getting clever and creative with ways in which that archive footage is actually being shown. So, TG Carr and Connacht Rugby did some nice work around the Pro 12 final from 2016, and the replay of that, and kind of essentially live Twitter commentary almost as things were happening. And we've seen that type of format replicated in a few different spaces. And then the other thing is that I suppose we're getting an insight into some of the things we would never have seen before that are a new reality for sporting organizations. So if you look at Munster Rugby and the fact that, you know, we've seen things like the screenshots of the Zoom calls that Stephen Larkham is doing with the players, with video analysis of games and matches. So, you know, there's a realization that, you know, organizations and players can't do the things they normally did. They can't meet up as groups as they normally would have. And yet, much like the rest of the world and the rest of the economy and everyone, I suppose, who's in work at the moment, we're going to have to find and are finding new ways of doing it. But as sports fans, this gives us a really interesting insight, because we're well aware of the kind of changes we've got to make in our own offices and our own lives. But seeing the changes that players have to make, that organizations have to make, and that level of insight has been one of the real highlights, I guess, in terms of what the organizations have done on social.
Okay, one of the things that sort of globally is being looked at is trying to bring a return to action through, through either playing behind closed doors, and we'll talk a little bit about that, or in the virtual world of creating environments like players playing on, you know, FIFA 20 in the football world. I've watched 2 Grand Prix won by Charles Leclerc, the Ferrari driver. And honestly, there's probably not a huge amount of difference in terms of watching it on a game as opposed to watching it live, other than the fact that the damage button is switched off. But we're moving more and more towards virtual. Is social media going to be the channel through which an awful lot of that is happening, or has that yet to be determined? Because live streams on Twitter and Instagram, you know, they looked as though they were kind of always going to be slightly on the margins of your mainstream. Now they're just beginning to edge closer into that being exactly where people want to watch.
Yeah, I mean, like, so the phrase that we've used in this space for a long time has been the idea of the second screen, right? So it's this idea that you will watch content on one screen and you will then sort of engage with it on another. And really, it's the same principle, you know, except for the fact that at the moment, the live content isn't live and it's not real in real world. So yeah, we're seeing some of that virtual and esports type content starting to get played. And like you say, organizations, I think, are trying to come up with clever and creative ways to keep fans engaged by showing these type of events and coming up with this kind of activity. But social, like, for a lot of people right now, it's one of the only ways they're getting a connection to sport. Because, you know, particularly, I think if you have, you know, depending, I suppose, kind of like maybe on the TV subscription you have or the access you have to sport on TV, you may be far more limited than you would have been in terms of the kind of sport that you can get through other mediums. And it means that social is a great place to go to get video footage, to see interviews. So really, I think what we're seeing at the moment is that in the absence of content in the real world, social has kind of come into its own as a way to connect fans and organizations and sponsors ultimately too, because sponsors are trying to find clever and creative ways to stay connected to fans that they would have traditionally done through, you know, again, kind of live sporting events or televised sporting events. So now you're seeing rights holders and sponsors come together and come up with new ways. And I think one of the most positive things in all of this is a large part of it has to do with charity. So you're seeing really, really good initiatives between brands or corporates as sponsors, sporting organizations, and the talent that they have available to them coming together and raising funds for a charity sector that has been decimated by the shutdown and the lockdown. And that's probably been one of the real highlights we've seen in terms of social media and sport.
It has. It's been a crowded marketplace, but we'll talk about a couple of those initiatives that have been coming out. If I can come to you, Gareth, you've got a massive base of followers in football. You've had massive breaking news stories with Mick McCarthy, passing the baton over to Stephen Kenny, and you've got a lot of uncertainty about when the game, is going to take place against Slovakia. All sorts of things going on. The FAI sort of social media streams seem to have been hopping. How challenging has it been to actually, keep that going? Because the fan base seemed definitely to be wanting to know more about it.
I don't think it's been challenging because we've got a very creative team in our communications departments, led by Cal Dervin, director. Then we've got Matthew Turnbull, videographer. We've got Adam Thompson, looks on our after underage football. Kieran Crowley looks after under 21s in League of Ireland, and Daniel Kelly looks after grassroots. So we have calls every day, and we've constantly come up with new ideas. And as Stephen alluded to, there's a lot of archive footage that's been rolled out, and we're very lucky that coming up now in June we'll have a lot of stuff that we can reel out in terms of clips from World Cups and European Championships that we've been involved in. But the way we've approached things is that we've kind of broken it down into two elements. One is content that matters, and one is content that engages. And I suppose on content that matters, we've done things, and we've linked up with Down Syndrome Ireland. We've done a live Q&A with Stephen Kenny and Niall Quinn to raise funds for them and raise awareness for Down Syndrome Ireland. And also created brand new grassroots channels as well. And we have a home skills series which encourages kids all around the country to get out and stay active, with daily tutorials, I suppose, that are led by a number of ambassadors from our men's team, our women's team, and former internationals as well. That featured on Operation Transformation last night with Niall Quinn helping out there, and that's been hugely popular. To almost come to 250,000 engaged on that so far, and it's very new. We're also doing a video series called Stay at Home, which kind of gives an insight to international footballers and kind of what they're doing for this kind of, so it kind of gives that connection to, okay, you know, footballers are human as well. They're reading books, they're watching Netflix, they're learning to cook or whatever. And the content that engages, then we're just kind of trying to keep it going on the football side. What are people interested in? So Adam Thompson came up with a great idea of Coaches Insight. So we kind of get a weekly thing of into our international coaches of, you know, their thoughts and their processes. And we're doing a lot of live games on our channels as well, underage games, women's games, under 21s, and League of Ireland every Friday night as well. And we've done a lot of content like that, so that's been really good. And we've kind of tried to engage with our sponsors during it as well. We've worked well with Nissan Active Challenge. We're working with Intersport Elbreys about a possible return for summer soccer schools. Hopefully that can happen. And we've done an incredible initiative with Boots, which is you and Nissan has helped with that, where our development officers, who are very much the vocal point of the communities, they came up with the idea of, why don't we use our services and our time and the Nissan cards that they have to pick up prescriptions from Boots pharmacies and deliver them to vulnerable people. And that's been a huge plus, and that's the type of thing that we want to do to make a difference, even though football is on hold, to continue making a difference. And the content is one thing, but we also want to be able to be an association that connects to the communities all of the time.
I think that's been a real winner. It was nice, you know, I know that Nissan provided the cars, the FAI provided the coaches, and Boots provided the, you know, the pharmacy. So it was a really nice integrated way of working it through. I was also intrigued to see Niall Quinn's background as well on it. There has been a sense we've seen an awful lot more inside the lives of players and coaches in a way. Has that been comfortable for them? Because most of us don't have, you know, that sort of the exposure that people would actually be curious about it, but they do. And that sort of element of living life in a goldfish bowl, well, your entire life is in a goldfish bowl now. Has it been something that's arisen with the players or any of the coaches, or is everybody just rowing in on this together?
A little bit of both. I think there's an element of that. Previously, we would have had a bit of an attitude of not kind of approaching international footballers when they were at their clubs, kind of leave them alone, kind of let them focus on their club matters and stuff like that. And but through the relationships that we've built with players and managers and coaches as well, we've been able to kind of link in with them, and I suppose firstly they're happy to hear from us and they're kind of happy to connect. And secondly, when you come to them with content and ideas that's kind of fun and interactive and engaging, like the short sessions that we did of, you know, players showing off and talking about previous jerseys they've collected during their careers, that went down really well. And the Stay at Home series, we've got another couple of series to come in the next weeks. We've basically got 2 months of content already mapped out, which is great. And the players have been very good with their time. And I think it really comes down to relationships. It's the relationships that you build up when you work with them in international camps. And then once you have that level of trust, I think that they're okay with it as well. And okay. I think that's probably the little bit of difference that probably kind of restricts players sometimes from doing a huge amount of media, because there's that level of trust when you work with an NA like us, or you work with a club, for example. And that's something that we want to foster without exploiting it too much.
Yeah, it's great that those relationships, though, which are being kind of, reforged and retested now in many ways, will hopefully actually have quite a long tail on it as well, so that it kind of changes the way that the fans and the players actually see it. More of a sort of an engagement rather than just a broadcast side of it, and quite natural as well. There's no staging of things in the same way as might have been the case previously with creating that one perfect Insta story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when generations gone by, when we grew up, you want to learn about your favorite player. You read magazines, you saw news reports, you read newspapers. Now we're in a digital age now, so it's completely different. So now we want to know what we do, but not only do we want to read about it, we want to see them. We want to see their habitats. We want to see their, their lives. We want to kind of see them seeing it on video. We want to interact with them, and that's been great. And it's a credit to the players that they're open enough to doing it. And it's something that a lot of our sponsors want to get involved in as well. And again, you have to find a balance there to what works and what works with certain players or certain sponsors or certain types of content. But it's been a very good period for us. And again, the relationships has been the backbone to that. And I think it's something that I think will continue going forward.
It's funny how everything changes and everything stays the same. I remember buying Shoot magazine as a kid to find out that every first division footballer as was at the time, that they just liked steak and chips as their favourite meal and milk as their favourite drink. But we've just moved on and technologically now. Maeve, you were kind of on the cusp of this with the higher education, the GAA championships, that the men's, the Fitzgibbon and the Sigerson, they managed to get played. I know some of the ladies football and that didn't, but you were ready to announce the players who were, on the team of the year and everything like that, and to do a nice awards ceremony and everything like that. And then this happened, but you pivoted nicely in towards using social media as a way of creating an alternative real world environment. How quickly did you have to move on that?
Yeah, I suppose, the award ceremony usually takes place the first Monday in April. So we kind of, I suppose, in March kind of had an inkling that wouldn't be possible. And ourselves in the GAA were still committed to recognising the players, So then when we, I suppose, cancelled the awards, we were feeling how could we recognise these players? How could we give them their stage that is kind of taken away from them? Within our business, obviously our core product is quite vital during this time to everyone. So, there's some hesitations about the communications that we should be putting out. All our communications should just be reassuring customers and talking about our service. But I suppose we do sponsorship for a reason, and that's to engage customers and fans kind of on a deeper level. So we took the decision that we'd go ahead and we'd give the players the platform they deserved. So we wanted to do a media release and a social media release. And I suppose when you look at Sigerson and Fitzgibbon, and I was actually talking to Stephen about it earlier this week, it's a huge legacy game. Anyone who's ever played Sigerson and Fitzgibbon will talk about it till the day they die. And, it's also a huge starting ground for any players to kind of get noticed, so it's a huge opportunity for those kind of players to be named on the team of the year so that they can go on and, start on their county teams, when the championships kick off. So we took the decision, I suppose, to proceed with it. So usually we would have done just a media launch with, letting the journalists know who was named on the team of the year. But I suppose everyone being stuck inside, it gave us an opportunity to really maximise the reach of that, because there was no other sporting updates, so we could really kind of take advantage of that and spread the word on social media. So we created lots of social assets, including the teams of the year, and then we created a little individual image for each player of the year. So we posted them across Facebook and Instagram, the full teams, but a lot of our sporting audience is on Twitter. So we actually did a full thread giving each player a tweet tagging their college, their club and their county, so that, could really spread the word wide. And I suppose we worked really closely with the GAA in terms of the higher education social pages, putting it out in line with us. And we've seen like really, really good traction, like lots of local radio stations, local newspapers picking it up, sharing it, and it really garnered massive kind of national reach, and really kind of gave the players, I suppose, the platform they deserved. So it worked really, really well, and I think it was a good decision. We're delighted ourselves in the GA that we did it.
Okay, I know it's too early to start planning as to whether championships are going to take place or anything like that, but if you run again with your haircut theme from the minor championships, I think that will have pretty strong resonance by the time we manage to escape out of our homes. One of the things as well that we would have been looking forward to now in the next week or so was getting out for Darkness into Light. I know an awful lot of sporting stars and organisations have gotten behind that down the years. Obviously, it's not going to happen now, but that is a major, substantial fundraiser for Pieta, or as Pieta House as it used to be known. And you've again pivoted and created an online version of that we're being asked to support as well. Again, in terms of both the creativity and as Gareth was saying, the stuff that matters. How important was that, and how did that come together when everybody is just working as we are now on a screen basis?
Yeah, well, we're on, I think, idea and creative platform and execution number 4 at this stage for Darkness into Light. And so it's just an absolute testament to our team internally and to all the agencies we work with. We would have had a full kind of registration campaign, ready to go live to encourage people to participate in Darkness into Light. So we had to bench that, go back to the drawing board. What could we now do? Originally, Darkness into Light was going to be postponed till October. So we were kind of looking at a pre-registration campaign, asking people to pre-register for the event in October. I suppose as the situation evolved further, we're not sure whether a physical walk will be able to take place even in October. So we had to pivot again, and then that's where we kind of landed on the Darkness into Light Sunrise Appeal. I suppose the campaign for us is twofold. Number one, it's absolutely vital that we bring in funds for Pieta. As you mentioned, they're so reliant on this as their main fundraiser, and 80% of their funds come from public, and they're in a tough situation at the moment where they're having to pivot, and all their centres are closed, and they're moving all of their therapy sessions, online on video calls and over the phone as well. So we just really needed to bring in funds for them. But the second most important thing about Darkness into Light, and similar to kind of any sport or kind of physical outing, it's all about community. And it's actually, the event itself is that kind of sense of solidarity, of everyone coming together to kind of stand in solidarity with those impacted by suicide. So whatever kind of avenue we wanted something that could bring people together. So I suppose the Sunrise Appeal does that. We're asking people to get up at 5:30, watch the sunrise, and kind of, for those who are maybe in apartments who can't see the sunrise, for everyone to kind of share that moment on social media and just feel that, everyone's kind of in this together, and that, while we're apart, we're all still standing together at that time. And even, again, I think that the sporting community has been fantastic in supporting that. There's a few different initiatives I've seen kind of sidelined to our appeal, like in terms of, I've seen Carrigaline GA Club are doing a run for Pieta, an LGFA club, St. Nathy's, is doing a solo for Pieta. I seen Aisling Thompson on Instagram yesterday saying she wanted to, hit a ball against a wall for Pieta. So I think, it just shows like the sporting community are really, powerful in supporting charities during this time, and they're an inspiration to everyone else. And I know if anyone's seen it, the Do It for Dan kind of fundraiser that went online, like it was all the sporting communities just jumped in on that, rugby, GA, golf, racing, everyone really, really got behind it, and they achieved amazing things for that family. So, we're hoping kind of the sporting community will support us and Pieta through this and kind of bring in the funds that they need.
That's right. Raw eggs, toilet rolls, and biscuit challenges. I did a biscuit challenge with my daughter, which we synchronized perfectly on the first take as well. Very impressed with that. But everybody's getting involved in these kind of things, and there's a sense of kind of stir craziness about some of them. In terms of the technology to actually sort of translate that into funds, a lot of them, have carried links through to, other technologies, that are actually the fundraising pages. Is that is the noise of them. Like, there are so many of them out there at the moment. Is there a danger, do you think, I'd ask it of you, Stephen, in particular, you'd be acutely aware of this. Is there a danger that you have to be big in order to actually make it work? Or would something like Do It for Dan, which is brilliant, and it gets 2 million, but does that mean that others that are going up against that just find it a little bit harder to get people's time on their timeline, so to speak?
It's a good question. It probably ties into a broader question around the increased level of activity that we're seeing on social networks. So in Ireland, for example, we've seen tens of thousands of new Twitter users join the platform in the last 2 months, because for a lot of them, they've realized beyond sport that Twitter is where, for example, our Minister for Health is going to live stream 10 or 15 minutes of an update, or it's where they're going to hear numbers in the evening that they want to be updated on. So we're seeing a much bigger audience now emerge on some networks. And some of these are people who would never have used, in particular, Twitter ever before. So it does mean that there's a broader audience beginning to become available to people who are looking in this example, I guess, to fundraise. But equally, people are looking for causes to support. So we know at the moment that there is an awful lot of bad news, right? We're living through it globally. So increasingly, people are looking for things that they can support, and they're looking for ways in which they can make a difference. So if you're a frontline healthcare worker, or potentially if you work in a utility or an essential service, then you can point and say, all right, what I'm doing right now is absolutely making this essential difference to what's going on. But for others, and for many people, they look to social as a way in which they can potentially positively contribute. And so my hope would be, and certainly the Do It for Dan example is a really good example of it, there is momentum and there is an awful lot of support, and people want to be able to help. So I would be very hopeful that in the case of Pieta and other sponsorship pieces and fundraisers that come up in the coming weeks and months, that they'll see an increase in the level of donations that are happening. And I wouldn't worry as much about the noisiness. I think people will seek these things out. They are being shared, and people will have their own things that they feel affiliated to. So there will be particular sponsorships, there'll be particular charities that they want to support. And as long as those charities remain vocal and leverage the associations they have. So again, Gareth talked about some of the excellent work that the FAI is doing in this space, and we've seen a number of different organizations do this. It really has been one of the most positive things that's come out of the last 6 to 8 weeks on social. It was also interesting to pick up on Gareth's point around the players and getting them to actively participate. I think we forget sometimes that when athletes are participating in sport, particularly team sports, quite often they stay away from social media. And one of the reasons they do that is to protect their mental health, because we know that there are an awful lot of armchair pundits who will very, very openly criticize the performance of these players, quite often with no knowledge as to maybe why performance is dipping, no knowledge of their personal circumstances or any underlying things that might be there. And so there has definitely been in the past, I think, a very valid fear and concern around athletes. And you talked about that kind of sort of that Instagrammable image or that sort of perfect scene that we paint. That's often because they don't want there to be a kind of a warts and all view of their lives, because it may open them up to further criticism. To an extent, one of the best things about this break from active playing is that has gone. It has essentially disappeared because there is no performance to criticize. And we're realizing now that we want to be connected to these athletes. We want to be connected to them. And I think from a commercial point of view, what we'll see is athletes, both in a team setting and as individuals, will emerge from this with a new value they'll be able to leverage when it comes to their sponsorship and commercial agreements. Because I would imagine, and we don't have a line of sight in these numbers yet, but you're going to see at the end of this, a number of players who have very, very big social followings that they wouldn't have had before. So they'll have a bigger audience they can communicate with, but also there'll be then increased confidence and comfort on social networks, because they'll have gone from a situation where they've seen this as somewhere where people just bash their performance or give out about them or criticize them, to somewhere where there actually can be an awful lot of good and where they can use it for good. And again, I think the Do It for Dan example is a really good, a really, really good example of this. You know, athletes and sporting organizations came together as individuals and collectively have transformed the family's life. And you're hopefully going to see this replicated through the work for Pieta and a wide range of other charities over the coming months. And I definitely think when we go back to normal, whatever normal will be, one of the groups who are going to be stronger for it are professional athletes and organizations who will bring with them a bigger audience and hopefully a more engaged audience too.
Okay, yeah, it is. It's interesting. And again, there are so many different things that are going on out there. How challenging, Gareth, is it for you as an organization that you might have, you might have a dozen coaches and, 36 teams out there and a couple of professionals, all of whom have decided that this is where they want to invest their energy. And wouldn't it be great now if we get the FAI to actually sort of do a piece on this or retweet it or anything like that? How careful do you need to be in terms of not being just, a kind of a central clearinghouse for every single charity appeal that's going on out there? Is that something that is carefully monitored, that you need to be mindful of?
Yeah, absolutely. It is something, even away from this pandemic, it's something we deal with on a daily basis. We constantly have people coming outside the association, inside the association, people connected to the association looking for support for various initiatives. And we do have to filter it. We do have to look at what's pertinent, and there are certain causes that we would support at certain times for certain reasons. And we do what we can, and there's many different ways of doing that. And we have supported different initiatives during the last couple of months as well. I suppose it really kind of ties in with our attitude towards social media, which you can see reflected in Stephen's monthly reports, in that our volume of posts wouldn't be as high as other sporting organisations, because our attitude is really quality over quantity, and we want to engage with people more than really bombard them with stuff. And even at that, I still probably feel that we're probably posting too much at times, and I'd like to kind of decrease that. But then again, there is level of there's definitely an appetite at the moment for more content, more fresh content, and it's easy to throw out things, to retweet stuff and like that. But we have to find a balance there to what works, what serves our purpose, and what links into the values of the association as well. I think that's really important, and we do support many initiatives, as I mentioned, and particularly, as alluded to earlier, the Boots initiative. Like, that came from our development officers. That's the idea came from them, and that's something that's brilliant, And I think that's something that's really sparked during this whole period, is that the idea generating process has really gone association wide, and everybody's trying to filter it back in. And it's easier with Zoom calls every day that people are having, and different group meetings and stuff like that they can be shared and they can be discussed, and then plans can be rolled out of how we can execute them and deliver them.
It's great, all those hierarchical old things of who was sitting at the top of the table, depending on, getting the loudest share of voice. We're all just boxes now, so everybody's voice is of equal importance. There's one thing I want to touch on. I've been watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary on Netflix. Great, sort of deep insight into that whole world of NBA and the Chicago Bulls, where they came from and all the rest of it. But the one thing that struck me, probably from a professional point of view as much as anything else, is the amount of content which they actually had, even when he was in North Carolina, even when he was in high school as a kid. He's a self-confident guy, but I can't imagine that when he was 15 years old that he realized there was going to be a Netflix documentary about him 2 decades down the line. The amount of content which is being grabbed now, is it hugely important for now, but also for the future, that we actually sort of get to see real life captured? I know you've got Matthew Turnbull on board there. He's part of this year's 30 under 30 that we run with PwC. I'll have to get him to video the meeting when we all come together again to capture that for posterity. But now that you're looking for content from the past and for great moments, is there a shortage of it? Is there something that you kind of think, oh, I wish I had Jack Charlton and Morris, sort of walking down the street in advance of that game?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we'd like to explore going forward. I suppose it comes down to an access thing, and goes back to the level of trust I spoke of earlier, and it was always kind of, that was a closed market, you know, going back all those generations where, you know, there was no in-house media team. There was, you know, in many cases there wasn't even a press officer or a media officer with teams. So if you look at, even if you look at, we're going to be talking about behind closed door sports, you know, PSG played Dortmund, Borussia Dortmund there just before this pandemic started in behind closed doors game. And one of the only sets of media that was allowed in was the in-house media teams of the respective clubs. So it shows the importance of those. It's the same way with all these all-for-nothing documentaries on Amazon that have all this access, but it's still very controlled by the clubs as well. Yeah, we'd like to have a lot more content. For us, we have to balance it. We're one of 55 national associations under the UEFA umbrella, and we're one of the unique associations in that we cover everything in Irish sport. We cover grassroots all the way up to elite level. Most associations would only focus on one area, maybe their international teams, and the league would be a separate company or something like that. So we have a very small team, as I mentioned earlier, and we don't really have much of a budget either, you know, to be honest. So we do a lot of stuff is very much generated in-house. Matthew's doing a great job at the moment, along with the other guys, Daniel, Kieran and Adam. And we have to kind of keep on top of things because of that. The access comes with trust, and we do find that more and more that we're getting to open that gate a little bit more wider, because of the type of content that we produce and that we don't exploit it with players or managers.
Okay, how, Maeve, from your point of view as a sponsor and working with a number of different sporting organisations, how much of a conversation point is that about the creative ideas versus the ability of a sporting organisation, which generally will always have a limited budget, to actually deliver what you might realise is a really great idea?
Yeah, I suppose it kind of goes back to that. It's trust, like it's, I've definitely thrown out some mad ideas like the haircuts to the GA, and then they're like welcoming it with open arms because it's an added bonus to fans. And it's the same with any ambassadors we work with. We work with ambassadors to promote our minor and higher education championships, and then as well on the Darkness into Light front to kind of help bring in funds for Pieta. And it's all kind of based about building relationships, the trust, and not overstepping the mark. So making sure that the ambassadors you have are connected to what they're doing, and that they, really want to take part, and you kind of take the lead from them. So, with all creative ideas, it only works if everyone's on the same page and everyone kind of thinks it'll work. So that's kind of, I suppose, then, it just goes back to trust, really. Okay.
I want to open it up so that we can get some questions from the floor. There's a little Q&A button down at probably the bottom of your screen, or maybe at the top in the bar that has all of the technology things. I'm just going to launch a poll on it as well, and I wrote this just before we actually kicked off, as to what do you consider to be the most important function of social media right now, just to get a sense from it across the room. I had put down 3 options of news, entertainment, and conversation. And the conversation, I guess, we can roll that out into the charitable side of it as well. But if you want to just have a quick look at that now and cast your votes on it. We've had some interesting insights that have been coming out of these polls in the webinars that we've had at the moment. So nicely moving as it is. A live environment there. Don't forget to ask your questions in there as well, so that we can come back to those now straight off. It's looking like a nice even split. 82% of the votes in so far. So if we looked even just at the top 2 between news and entertainment, news is just winning out there. So it is, as probably from a national governing body perspective, that's probably more important, and the conversation side of it. So again, a nice even split probably suggests that it is important across so many different areas that it's kind of hard to just pick on one of them. Okay, we'll close that down now. So so 38% news just coming out on top there, 32% for the conversation and the charitable piece of it, and 30% on it as an entertainment function. We've got our first question in there. Carla Reynolds from the Irish Ladies Golf Union. Hello, Carla. Possibly getting busy to reopen golf courses now, depending on what our Taoiseach says at 9 o'clock tomorrow evening. Thanks for hosting. Wondering if the guys have any suggestions for smaller NGBs to activate campaigns with smaller budget and resources. Gareth, you've mentioned the fact that we all think, well, if it's the FAI, they've got big budgets, or the GAA, but you're probably having to be as creative as any of the smaller ones in there. Is it that you have a creative idea and then you go look to see how much it will cost? Or do you work from I've got an X, Y, and Z budget here, what can I do with that money? Which comes first for you?
To be honest, budget doesn't usually come into it for us a lot of the time, because most of the content, 90% of the content we create, we wouldn't spend. We don't use outside companies, we don't use PR companies or anything like that. Everything we do is in-house. We would like to add to the team if we could going forward. Obviously, difficult times at the moment, but I think you just have to look at the resources you have available to you, but also the assets you have available to you. Have you got persons? We're very lucky to have a deputy CEO, Noel Quinn, who's a very popular former international, so he's been able to help with things. But our coaches, we've turned, helped to heighten their profiles. Our players that we've already discussed. Then there's things within your association or your business in terms of your location, what you do in the community, your different links with different people. There's so many different ways of creating content that you don't need a budget for, I feel. Budget is always a cherry on top for us, and of course we'd like to do a lot more things. We'd like to build a digital studio. We'd love to do a lot more podcasts. We'd love to do, just on the poll there that went up, the discussion element is something that we'd love to push a lot more for. And to not just be an association that churns out propaganda or news stories all the time. Not that we are pushing propaganda, by the way, but we would never dare do that. But we want to engage with our fans a lot more, and we do have plans to do that over the next couple of weeks as well, with the type of content that we're going to produce. And again, to be honest, we're not really spending much money at all. Like, even boosting posts and stuff like that, we don't really do that, a hell of a lot of stuff like that. And that's not because the FAI owes a lot of money to on the Aviva Stadium or anything like that. It's just the way that our model works and how we approach things.
Yeah, I guess that comes with having the bigger base, that the organic side of it will come through as well. Stephen, from your point of view, like in terms of the budget that you would sort of see or be perhaps privy to in terms of a social campaign, as opposed to an out of home or television and the sort of the bigger mainstream ones, like, do you see that there is creativity first for and possible with a relatively small amount of money?
If I'm honest, it's probably the biggest mistake we see being made. So we often see, particularly, let's say, smaller organizations and larger ones too, come up with amazing ideas, incredible creative, really high quality, and quite often high budget content, and then fail to invest in an activation. And it's often the downfall of really, really good content. And there are countless examples, unfortunately, of where really, really sort of heavily invested in creative content has been produced, and then not sufficient funding put behind the actual amplification of it. What I'd say in terms of the specific question from Carla, there's probably two things for me to focus on here. It's the word activate and it's the resources. So I think if the organization has a campaign and they're looking to activate it, well, then the resources I would be looking to sort of draw on would be the ones that they have available to them at hopefully no cost. So leverage your sponsorships like in a major way. If you have brands who you work with, there should definitely be ways to have good conversations with them about amplifying whatever the campaign is. So go to them, tell them what the campaign is, get the buy-in, and look for them to build it out, because quite often the sponsors will have a bigger audience than the organization itself. And the other is your athletes, so, if we take kind of the golfing world, quite often you will have an awful lot of golfers, like you pointed out, who can't play right now. And they're looking for ways in which they can support as well, both charitable organizations, but also the NGBs that they're affiliated to and that they represent. So, that they would be the first two ports of call. If I was in Carla's shoes, it would be to talk to the athletes and the talent, for want of a better word, that we have access to, and see how you can partner with them, and then talk to your sponsors and your commercial partners and see how they can also help to activate the campaign that you might be you planning.
Okay, we've got another one in from Noel Martin from Core. Interesting question. Aside from that, the sort of the comfort and the relationship between the athletes, what do we think might be a theme or a concept to emerge out of this on the social side of it that we wouldn't have necessarily seen 6 weeks ago, but which will become a thing that actually defines the way that we use social going forward? I might give that to you, Maeve, just to kick off with on it.
Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to the poll you just did. I think on social media, we're feeding out, like a lot of organizations are just constantly bombarding, feeding out information. And I think, we really need to strike the balance of kind of engaging content, informative content, and then that conversation piece. I think what we've seen during this pandemic is a lot more conversation across social and across digital channels. Like, we haven't cancelled events, we're making them digitally, we're communicating a lot more openly. And I think that will continue on social media. And I think maybe when, athletes and ambassadors and different things, I think might begin to open up to have a little bit more of a two-way conversation with fans directly, as opposed to, I know for any ambassadors, we'd usually put them out to media and then media would communicate that out to the fans. But I think there definitely might be a bit more of an opportunity of kind of a fan, kind of athlete kind of communication going forward. Not totally open, but I definitely think there's a space to grow that to some portion. Okay,
Gareth, and from your point of view, you've said that it would be good to get that conversation going and things like that. Have you got any insight that you can give us a little tease on some of the campaigns that you've got coming up?
Yeah, we're going to do. We're going to put it out to the fans to pick their all-time Ireland 11 on our men's and our women's teams, and we're going to tease that out over probably a week and a half. We're going to do a by position. Starting with goalkeeper, right back, left back, so on and so forth. I think that will be a really good engaging piece. Allow them to pick the team that they, want to be all-time 11. We've got a couple of other video series coming. We're going to announce something quite soon about Jack Charlton. He's coming up with his birthday soon, so we're going to do a lot of content around that. And I think, going back to the question there, I think one of the major changes that will happen is that I think that this kind of format of people from working from home will be extended going forward. It'll become more part of our working lives. So video calls and webinars and stuff like this will be quite commonplace. And I think what will happen is professionalizing it will become much more, I suppose, crucial. And I suppose one of the best examples of that of recent times, I think, was the NFL draft in American football. They 55 million people viewers for a 37% increase in last year, which is phenomenal. 600 camera feeds in different houses around the country in terms of players for the draft prospects and the coaches and the GMs. And I think how they did that by sending the cameras and the equipment and the tripods and the microphones to all of those people, having special routers for them and stuff like that, looking at their backgrounds, all that kind of thing. I think the professionalized side of that will really start to kick on. And I think if you look at Facebook, are getting ready to give an option now that you can charge for certain events, like charge for live events and classes and talks and stuff like that. So that'll be huge for sports organizations. And then if you can professionalize that, people will pay even more money, I think, and or at least be willing to, pay for those type of events.
Right, yeah. So if we can't actually pay to go and watch games in the stadium, we might be able to do micro payments to watch. I would have paid good money to see Mike Vrabel's thought processes before setting up his room on the NFL draft. If anybody hasn't seen it, just Google it. Mike Vrabel Insanity will probably bring it up to you. But he's got two kids who I have no idea why they were dressed up as they were. And there was a lot going on. The Tennessee Titans head coach. We've been speaking to Facebook as well about the potential of bringing together a group of people to actually sort of look at the ways in which both they and we did a big event with Twitter last year as well, that they would be able to actually sort of work closer with our community and the sport and the business community as well to do that. So we'll have news on that in the coming days and weeks. Stephen, this is your game, the analysis of where social media is going. If you had one thing that you would sort of lay your hat on as it stands at the moment, what would that be as to where we're going to emerge from in a different way to that which we went in?
I think it's probably to build on Garrett's point, really, and it's that idea that everything that we were told in the past we couldn't do, that wasn't possible, that the technology didn't exist for, or it just wouldn't work as well because it wasn't live or wasn't happening in person. That's essentially being debunked. And I think now what we've seen is a wide range of ways in which things can happen digitally and work really, really well digitally. That in the past we would have been told, you can only do this in person, it'll never be the same. So I think that's what's going to stick, essentially. I think as a new development, all of this is new, but I think you're going to see a huge number of situations, even from an employment point of view. So if you work in sport, or you work in social, or you work in, the sponsorship space, again, some of the things that maybe would have been put in place as restrictions in that maybe your physical location. So, if a major sporting body is based in Dublin, for example, and they were hiring a role and they felt the person had to work in the office, and you had someone in the west of Ireland or the north or the south who maybe sort of couldn't, for whatever reason, commute or relocate, I think those barriers now are being absolutely shown to be not the kind of barriers that we thought or perceived them to be. So I certainly think, to bring up a word from the past, that idea of decentralization, as small as an island as we are, we still, I think, sort of place this heavy emphasis on having to live potentially in Dublin or very close to your employer. I think that idea of physical distance has been removed. And it's not to say that we won't go to offices. We will. It's not to say that it's not important. It is. But I think my hope would be that from a sponsorship, marketing, sporting space, and maybe connected into sort of that broader social media piece, you will find that those who want to work and contribute in this space, that their location has become far less important. And I think that's a really positive thing, because I think it opens us up to very different voices joining.
Okay. The potential for colleagues working in New York and Melbourne as well as here as well, that will always bring a different perspective. We can sometimes get involved in those little local bubbles. Just one final question from the floor. Niamh O'Shea from Cricket Ireland. Hi, Niamh. She's making the point that there's been much talk about this pandemic being, the sort of the end of celebrity culture, but that sports stars, by virtue of their commitment into mental health and doing all of these good things, could actually emerge as stronger on it. So, more Lionel Messi and less Khloe Kardashian, perhaps. Do we think that sport has got an opportunity to kind of emphasize its importance in terms of the greater societal thing rather than just who wins a game? Just throw that open to the floor, so to speak.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think what we're seeing, like with sports stars, we see them on the pitch, we see them in post-match interviews. We don't often get an insight into their personal interests outside of their sport. And I think what we've seen over, the last number of weeks is more personality from a lot of athletes, where they're sharing kind of, charities that they support, and I think sport has a huge part to play in mental health. Staying physically fit, is good for your mental health as well. And I think, a lot of sports stars are seeing that, and that's why they're kind of talking about that type of thing. And I think it's just that authenticity. They're just talking openly and honestly. And there's been a few videos shared kind of debunking celebrities sitting in their mansions kind of going, oh, this is real tough. And people aren't taking that as truth. But I think sports stars do have authenticity in this area where, they are missing their sport. So they are really, really feeling it, and they're just communicating that really openly and honestly. And I think that's resonating with people.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, look, I'm conscious of the time, and I want to wrap it up. We always say that we'll get you in and out within the hour. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to spend those, sort of 10-second conversations that can spark off brilliant innovation. But we're doing some meetings whereby we're actually getting a little bit closer into that. So please do keep on watching out for the Daily News Digest. It pops into your inboxes at 9:30 every morning, and we're doing extra content during the day, shining a light on the kind of things which you're all doing. Stephen, we'll have next week, we'll have the April report, looking back on that, really looking forward to it. Gareth, we'll keep an eye out for all of those campaigns, and really great work that you're doing out there. And Maeve, I can't wait to see how that haircut is going to come through. One quick final thing, I was just reminded about the date for the sunrise for PHF. When is that going to be? Because I'm up at 5:30 every morning anyway, so it won't be a big thing. But for some, they might need to set an extra alarm clock. So what date are we doing that?
Saturday week, so May 9th at 5:30 a.m.
Saturday week, May 9th at 5:30 p.m. A very big thanks to everybody who has joined us this morning. Thank you for your time. We will be continuing with these, but I'm only the middle of this thing. That it's your ideas as to what you want to hear about that are driving the webinar series and the meeting. So please do feel free to get in touch and let me know what you want to hear about. And just before we go, a really special thanks to Maeve Galvin, who joined us to give real good insight there. Gareth, great stuff. Keep it going. No football, but plenty of football. And to Stephen as well. Love the insight. Really, really invaluable. And keep it going in this busier than ever world. Watch out for all the things that are happening virtually over the weekend. We've got GAA players playing FIFA. We've got cyclists. We've got triathletes. We've got Ironman things going on. There is going to be so much virtual sport over the weekend that we won't know which way to turn. And then hopefully the real world will come back again soon. But in the meantime, thank you very much to all of you.